All right, so my first ever section hike, I got a little gear obsessive and started buying a lot of stuff that I thought would be really cool to have, and I wanted to see if I could be a Bear Grylls and catch a fish if I saw a stream and do all this extra stuff. And so I packed all of that stuff in my pack, and I didn't bother weighing it before I went the first time. And I remember vividly the first minute and a half I was on the trail ever, on an Appalachian trail. I started to have a panic attack, a little anxiety going on, and definitely was freaking out. And so regained my composure and was able to keep going, but I was freaking out there a little bit at the beginning, thinking I'm not going to be able to make it over the next 3 days. So I would definitely call that a hiking fail. Everybody, welcome back to the Trail Connection Podcast. This week we're sharing some things that just didn't go quite right on the trails or on the camping experiences. And I got Brad O'Hearn back with me. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, a little bit.
So what's new with you, man?
Not a whole lot. Got a baby now.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Yep. So just living that dad life.
Yeah.
But
well, today I tried to incorporate a little bit of the audience. So I've got some stories that I can kind of share, but I wanted to just kind of catch up a little bit. And if you have anything that's kind of burning that you'd like to share, or anything off the top of your head, if you want me to dive into these, I can. And
I've got one, and just a real mini one of camping, fails or strange happenings.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the quick one. My mom and my aunt, this is when we were living in New Jersey, right before we moved to North Dakota, I want to say. But they took us on this vacation, and we drove up into New York State, where they used to live, and went because my grandfather was in the service as well. And so they used to live in New York State, and we did some camping while we were there. And the campsite, when we got there, there was this clump of caterpillars on the edge of the table, and it was just like a moving mass of caterpillars. They're like, whoa. We're all pretty small. And so, bug spray, lighter, you'd burn them off, and my mom got really mad. Anyways, that night, we set up the tents and everything, and that night, come to find out, it wasn't just the table that had all these caterpillars. It was all the trees had caterpillars in them. And so at night, they were just falling off the tree, and it was raining caterpillars. Yeah. And so it was just constantly. And so we didn't stay there more than one night. We were just we were out of there. But that was really crazy. I had never seen anything like that. Just a whole mass of caterpillars just falling from the trees.
We had a couple seasons like that down here growing up. where they're like the kind of nasty caterpillars that turn into moths. But I remember my dad had like one of those rope hammocks that was in the backyard, and we went out there one day, and like the whole thing was just like covered in these nasty puke brown like cocoons and everything, and like ruined that hammock. But yeah, like walking through the yard or getting in the cars, it's just always just falling everywhere. But I can relate. That's kind of gross. So let's see here. Let's see what we got. All right. So Dylan wrote in and said, I went to Ocala State Park back in 2011 with 5 other guys when only one person has a smartphone with near zero reception. We stopped by the ranger station to get some info and pay or whatever, and then began the hike to our camping with our camping gear. 3 hours into it, we all asked who had the map. Turns out no one grabbed one when we were there, and we had to rely on the guesstimations and what the ranger had verbally and vaguely told us the entire time. Never really found our spot, but we hiked all over for 2 days and found a road where we flagged the guy with a truck to drop us off at the beginning of the hike. Fail, but fun. So yeah, that kind of sounds a little bit like our last trip on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we weren't as lost, but
yeah, that's true.
We kind of knew where we were at, but flagging people down, that's almost what it came to.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was asking all types of people for stories, and we had a family get-together a couple weeks ago, and my cousin told me that one time he went camping with this girl he was dating in college, and she was really into camping, but he had only been a few times, and so they went, and she forgot the tent poles, and it started raining on them, and so like pretty much they just had to use the fly from the top of the tank or the top of the tent and just like wrap it around them to keep dry. Yeah. And that would definitely be a fail for sure. That's kind of an essential piece of the gear. Always check for the tent poles. So, what was your other one?
So my other one was me and my dad were. This is when we were living in North Dakota. My mom and brother decided to go to like Mall of America, some kind of.
Oh, you were camping?
No, they went to Mall of America. Me and my dad were like, well, we're not gonna go do that, and so we ended up going the opposite direction. So like Mall of America is to the east in Minnesota, and then where we went was west, and we went to Teddy Roosevelt National Park. And it's a small national park on the western edge of North Dakota, and relatively small. And I mean, I don't know if it's unknown, but when we went, there was never very many people there. And I don't know if that was just the times of year that we went, or if it was just not a very popular park. Anyways, we had a handheld GPS. Old school, like black and white, and it told you coordinates and kind of gave you like a vague map. It wasn't like Google Maps or anything. It was before all that. So he had bought that when we lived in New Jersey, and we had assumed that it just pulled the time data off of the satellites. Well, it didn't. You had to actually go in and change it manually to the specific time zone and all that to where you were. So we're now in mountain time, and that thing's set up for Eastern time. So it's 2 hours behind, or no, ahead. And so we're like, okay, we go on this hike, and we're just trolling along and just enjoying the scenery and everything. And we look down at the GPS and we're like, man, it's getting late. Like, we need to get back to camp fast before it gets dark and we get lost out here. And so we looked at the map and we saw like we remembered how long it took us to get out to where we were. I'm like, well, maybe it'll be faster on the roads. So we start just walking on the roads, and at one point my dad was just gonna give me the keys, because I was a track and cross country runner, and just run to the truck and come back and pick him up and then drive back to the camp. And so I was like, but we kept putting it off. We're like, well, we'll just keep hiking, we'll just keep walking, and eventually we just got back to the truck, and we get into the truck and turn the key, and it was 2 hours earlier than we thought. And so we had like this grand plan to like make these steaks and stuff, and so we're like, but that whole trip of just like being freaked out, turning around early, and just rushing back and walking the roads. And walking roads is way worse than walking a trail, for at least out there, because it's like, one, you're not even getting the scenery, and two, it's just asphalt. It's not, there's no, like, it's nothing good for your knees. So it was just and your feet, and it was just a long haul, and it made it way longer. Like, I think we ended up doubling our distance. And so anyways, I think we get back to camp, we make our steaks, and we get in bed, and then like the next morning we wake up and there's frost on everything. We had these one-man tents, and the condensation had built up, and it's just frost all in the tent, and like we had cloth sleeping bags, and so we woke up, and I think we were gonna stay another night, and we ended up just going to a hotel and getting in the hot tub and just enjoying life. And it's like, no. So that was like the one main camping fail I can remember that was just for lack of forethought,
So. It's funny. You're speaking of that GPS reminded me of my experience, me and John's first experience on the Appalachian Trail. So he was using his iPhone kind of as a GPS. I don't know if he had an app on there or whatever, but I had my Fitbit. And so when I first planned the route, I used the AT website. And they have the interactive map, but they don't have like the mileages in between, but you can drag, basically trace the map to like build your mileage. So I had like a vague idea of what each section was going to be between the gaps or whatever. And I was like, I got my Fitbit, I'll be able to kind of track it. And just FYI, Fitbits suck. They're not a good, reliable source for tracking distances whatsoever. I mean, for crying out loud, if you can like do this and get your step count to go up, then if you're swinging your arms while you're hiking a mountain, of course it's gonna tell you you've gone a lot further. So of course, poorly planned, thinking our first day was gonna be like maybe 10 miles, 11 miles, and we pull up into camp at 13 and a half. Like, I don't know if that's really what it was. That's what my Fitbit said, but it was probably pretty close to 12 miles or so. So, yeah, I definitely need to invest in a GPS tracker for sure. Joseph had one that he took with us when we went kayaking that I really want to get, something like that. But
when we went, I had my Fitbit, and I tracked it using the run feature with GPS, and I felt like it was pretty accurate using the GPS. Like, if you're just using like step count on that thing, I don't think it's going to be accurate at all. But and that's what ended up happening, is like we ended up, I think, draining the battery on it, and because the GPS function on it like really kills the battery. So but I feel like it was pretty accurate for ours. But you also, the only reason we knew it was accurate is because the book that we had. So.
Yeah. So, good segue, quick plug. If you haven't checked out our first mini-cast, go ahead and do that. Do a quick review and introduction to the Appalachian Trail Through Hiker's Companion Guide. Really great book. Go check out that short video to get some more details on that product and get yourself one if you don't have one already. All right, so I got a couple more here. So Carson let me know he was hiking with his boys and choosing his own way. Ended up going horribly wrong. I remember this. It was my brother-in-law. We were coming back from a camping trip one time, and we had to hike across this creek. and I was kind of leading the pack, but a couple of guys were kind of like walking up side by side with me, and we were all just kind of like trying to get back. And I went one way over this log, and he went like 40 feet downstream on another log and totally like ate it, fell in the water, soaked in up to his knees in pretty nasty water that stands out there in the swamp. And I'll just go ahead and share this one too. So last episode, the camping convert episode, when I was taking Warren out there, I was kind of in a little bit of a hurry to get us out there and didn't really place my footing very well, and stepped on the end of a log that was pretty rotten, and it gave way, and like all the weight of my pack that was on me kind of sent me down. I actually fell like on my back, kind of on my butt, and totally soaked everything from the waist down, and my sleeping bag got a little damp, not too bad, but that wasn't very fun either. I ended up hanging out at around the fire that night in my underwear again, just like on the AT.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a trend here. should just plan on that. Yep. I guess.
Do like I did and just wear them like nylon short shorts.
Some
quick dry
lederhosen.
Yeah.
All right. So my mom and dad shared some stories with me that I had forgotten about these, but they were pretty funny. So we went camping as a family up in Anastasia State Park, which is up near Jacksonville, or actually St. Augustine, and it's kind of close to the beach. And so the family went down to the beach for a few hours, and we put the food in the tent until we got back. And I mean, this was like middle of the day. It wasn't really in the evening or anything. But that was a pretty big mistake, because the squirrels ate a hole in the corner of the tent, and they were sitting in the middle of the tent like chowing down when we got there. And my sister's mother-in-law was there, like her in-laws were there with us, and that was their tent. Like she got in there and was like shooing them out or whatever, and the squirrels had pooped on their bed, and she was like, "There's poop in here." It was so funny, and not for them, but it was really, really funny. So definitely put the food in the car if you're at a KOA type place that you got a place to secure it. And then another time we were camping, this is whenever I was pretty young. We were going to bed, I think. Let's see, what did she say? Yeah, we were getting ready to go to bed, and so they packed up all the food in the containers and put them in the car. But they left a plastic container with cups and some marshmallows and like hot chocolate and stuff out. And so we were laying there, and there was like one lantern left on, and we heard some stuff moving around, and they looked up, and like they just saw these shadows moving around, which looked like bears. Mm-hmm. They're like pretty big, but it ended up just being raccoons. Like the shadow was a little bit bigger, but they got into that hot chocolate and had a cup. Oh, yeah. There was hot chocolate and marshmallows all over the campground. So, and I mean, they got through the plastic containers too. So I mean, we were talking about like bear bags or like critter bags and stuff like that when you're on the trails and all that. I mean, hanging stuff up is ideal. I remember, the first time that I had ever had an experience with hanging my food, I thought it was good, but like the type of bag, you want to make sure you got something that's got scent blocker on it too, because I just used like a ditty bag, and I had like, I'm assuming chipmunks or squirrels like nibbled into some of my nuts and little fruit bars and stuff like that. So, but it's pretty crazy. So, and I had one of my cousins, my distant cousins, tell me that her and a friend were camping one time. I think it was out in, Arizona, is what she said. And they had a tent, but where they had set up, they had like one of those flash storms that came up, and all this water was just like rushing down, basically just like running under their tent, because wherever they had set the tent up, it was like really hard surface on the bottom, not like mud or anything. It's kind of like rock. So they just felt all that water rushing underneath them, which that's a little impressive whenever you're out there and your tent becomes a waterbed. That's not fun. Let's see here. What else? All right, so I got a couple long ones from Ben. Ben's a buddy of mine that I'm planning on bringing on the show at some point. He's got a lot of different experience, but so this one, he said he hiked in Shenandoah with his friends using shoes that he normally mowed yards with, just old sneakers, and they weren't really too bad, except the toe box was a little cramped, and on the downhills, obviously, like his toes were kind of digging in the front. By day 2, you could definitely feel, the rubbing. I knew it was going to be an issue. Started to get slightly painful, and by day 3, it was painful, but he could feel his heartbeat in his big toes, which is not good. The repetition caused large blood blisters. Some of this is kind of gross. I'm sorry, Ben. I want to share this, but it's kind of gross. Basically, went on a very long hike and with the wrong hiking shoes, and ended up hurting his toes pretty bad with that. So ended up having to wrap them and tape them up a little bit. But anyway, he said, quite frankly, that wasn't the biggest issue of the trip. Quite frankly, I was out of shape and very sore by that point. We planned to do more miles, but instead bailed a night and day early. Really, our whole group was suffering quite a bit. I guess that's what happens when 6 guys decide they're tired of being stuck in their office jobs and therefore decide to try a 50-mile hike on somewhat of a whim. Shortly after the trip, maybe a week later, there was no way that the toenails were going to somehow reattach themselves. Gross. But yeah, 50 miles on a whim is not, doesn't always work out that well. And let's see here. So, I got one more here, and then I got some top 5s and top 10s mistakes that people will make, and it kind of sums up, I think, what all we've been talking about. So Ben also said probably the only other fail that is the funniest, we set out with 2 sailboats for a camping trip to Shell Key. My buddy Josh and I were in a little catamaran and made short work of arriving to the island for the night. As the sun set, we became increasingly convinced that the other boat was not going to make it. We weren't worried, just confident they got lost or stuff in the grass flats, etc. Main problem was this: because they were on a small catamaran, small trampoline, and no storage, and because the distance to the island was not that significant, literally everything we needed was stored on the larger sailboat: water, additional clothes, tents, etc. So everything worked out. I don't want to be too dramatic, but it was in fact cold and windy that night. Being a popular camping destination, there were many other people there that night. Not my proudest moment, but we literally stole firewood from one of the other campsites. The island has none. With a lighter that some people had gifted us earlier, we got a small fire going. We threw whatever we could strap together around us that was dry and into the fire, stole additional wood as we became increasingly desperate, and ultimately made it through the night. In true Florida fashion, I remember sailing back to the docks around 11 or noon with the sun bright and temps quickly shooting back up to the 70s. In other words, it didn't take us long to be laughing and enjoying high spirits once again, especially as we sailed past Ethan's boat, which was indeed stuck in some shallow water all night. Once again, 10 out of 10 experience, would definitely do it again. I'll never forget digging little resting areas that circled the fire that night and scooping hot sand from near the base of the fire to put on top of me to capture just a little bit that was of its fleeting warmth. So yeah, he's a storyteller. I can't wait to bring him on the show.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't read. But another one real quick that I thought about. Justin, who was on our campfire cooking episode, was telling me that for a period of time in his teenage years, he was kind of deathly afraid of raccoons. And he said that he was camping with his mom one time, and she took this like hair dryer with her to use as a heater in her sleeping bag. She would plug it in and like throw it down on the bottom and just like use her toes to kick it on, like heat up heat up her feet, and then kick it off whenever it got too hot. And he said that she like got up to go to the bathroom or something like that, and he was in the tent by himself, and he heard all these like noises around the tent and stuff, and kind of like the story about my parents, like saw the shadow, which looked a lot bigger, and he's like, all that I had to scare them off was this blow dryer. So he like grabbed it and was like trying to scare these things off. And so he said that, you know, that didn't help, you know, with the fear that he had. But I thought that was a pretty funny story. It's amazing what like a small sound or you know, just like leaves crunching will do if you're out in the middle of nowhere in pitch black or by yourself. Yeah. I would always be so freaked out whenever I would go back in the woods behind my house, even if it was just for a walk in the middle of the day. Like if I was by myself, the slightest like twig crack or whatever, I was like, oh, what was that? So when you add camping or anything with pitch black out there, it just amplifies all that. So, all right, so top 5 mistakes that thru hikers make. Let's see if we fall on this list for sections. Carrying too much weight. Yep, that's me.
Check that off.
That is the most common mistake thru hikers make, is to carry too much weight when they start the trail. And that's also why if you do large sections or if you're also doing a thru hike, you see a lot of gear in like the campsites because people are bailing weight like crazy. Hiking too far and too fast too soon. So that I can definitely relate to that one. My very first time ever on the Appalachian Trail. Definitely did too much on the first day, and it ruined the rest of the trip for us because we were dying the second day. Overestimating gear. So yeah, done that. Thinking something is going to be used that I don't end up using, or thinking it's going to work better than it does. So definitely can relate to that. Finding the right footwear. I've lucked out, man. Like with my boots, I've been really happy that I mean, really the only issue I guess that I had was just breaking them in. I didn't break them in enough before I went the first time, but since they've been broke in, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I was worried about mine with the Appalachian Trail just because they're more designed for out west, like hard rock kind of stuff. So I was like, man, I don't know if these are going to work well in a softer kind of dirt and like pebble kind of thing rather than like slick rock stuff out west.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any problems as far as like feet on our hike, you know. So yeah, that one I didn't have any problems with.
All right, number 5, skipping the shakedown hike. I'm a little embarrassed to admit I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that it's kind of like a practice run to make sure everything's working. You got a good weight and balance and all that. But somebody correct me on that. You know, write me right in and tell me that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it makes sense. Like a sifting process. Like go on a hike, lose a little weight here, just by doing something around here, you know.
Yeah. So there
would have been helpful.
That does kind of make sense. So I also grabbed the top 10 list of mistakes that new hikers make, and one of them was this is off of the camping list. Not planning and not practicing. So it makes sense. All right, so the top 10 list for this one comes from the Adirondack hikers, but I thought it was a good list, so I wanted to grab it. Wearing brand new hiking boots or shoes. So we just talked about that. Yeah, definitely take some time to break them in ahead of time. finding out that they're a little too sloppy would not be good when you're 20 miles into a hike. Trying to tackle too much. Again, that's a little little repetitive from the other list that we had, but it's very common. A lot of people think that they're able to do a lot more. I'm definitely guilty of that. Thinking, yeah, 10 miles is no big deal when you live in Florida and there's like 1% grade change.
Yeah.
Going over speed bumps doesn't count. Exerting yourself too much early on. Yeah. Definitely can relate to that one too. Of course, I don't really have much endurance. Mr. Trail Runner over here, like, blowing me out of the water.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that to come up on these lists, is like not being physically fit enough.
Yeah.
Or like getting stronger, getting more endurance.
This one's interesting. Wearing denim.
That's a fail, or
No, that's on the top 10 mistakes.
oh,
for the
mistakes.
for
Yeah.
the
Okay, that
Adirondack.
makes sense. That makes sense.
I mean, I guess a lot of people do kind of wear jeans whenever they go hiking. Yeah, that's not good for friction
Yeah.
at all.
I brought jeans on our hike. I never wore them. I mean, I ended up just ditching pants altogether and just going shorts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I quickly found out that was extra weight and like something I would never wear anyways, you know, because it was just, it's just not conducive for the environment.
Yeah. Starting too late in the day. That's definitely a big mistake, especially if you have a schedule that you're trying to like keep and certain points you're trying to get to every day. It kind of becomes this catch-up game like we talked about on our AT episode, to where just kind of getting a later start can really throw off the day.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if you run out of daylight, I mean, you need to kind of be in an area you can pack out and sleep and not really be on the trail. So definitely keep that in mind. Not checking the weather forecast. Oh man, just looking at the percentage doesn't really count. You need to check the radar for sure.
Yeah.
That was our mistake our first night, I think.
Yeah.
Not bringing enough water. Yes. True. Forgetting to pack snacks. I think that probably applies more to like a day hike.
Yeah.
For me, like I've always, even when I've taken the kids out and stuff, like I usually overdo it with the snacks, and I know I definitely did overdo it with the food, on the section hikes that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand it. Skipping breakfast. Yeah. We, pretty much every time I've gone, there's only been like one day that I've actually taken the time to cook a breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Most times it's, like a protein bar or like a Cliff Bar or something with some kind of dried fruit. And I try to do like a quick breakfast, but just starting with nothing is not a good idea at all.
I mean, yeah, especially if you're used to having something in the morning. I do quite a bit of fasting and like exercising fasted.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think on the trail I ended up like having like a protein bar and like some applesauce or something. Like I didn't want to risk it, but like I go almost every day up until like noon or so without eating.
Yeah.
And even at work, like even during busy times, if you got your mind set on something, like I don't really notice it, even if it's like pretty strenuous.
Yeah.
But
I think it's definitely important, like if you're sweating a lot and losing a lot of electrolytes and like the salt and stuff, you definitely need to try to replenish that throughout the day. So having good like salty snacks like mixed nuts, or I buy these little organic fruit strips. I think Pure something is the brand, but those are great because they kind of hydrate me too. And so like the 3 times I ran out of water, I would just pop one of those in my mouth, and it helped kind of help prolong the amount of time till I needed to absolutely get some. So
I
that's
think we
good.
talked about that too, like having some like Propel or something with electrolytes in it that you could just add to water, because even, I mean, one of the big things with fasting is, like they say, if you're drinking water and you're not eating, like you're expending those electrolytes faster. So like a big thing with fasting is like you have to make sure that you're getting your salts in, especially if you're exercising, because you can dehydrate yourself very quickly.
Right.
So yeah, that was something I was thinking about bringing next time I do a hike like that, was like some kind of electrolyte mix for water.
All right. And the last one for that list was spacing out. So taking your time, or like knowing the distances that you're going to do throughout the trip. That's a common mistake. Some people just like tackle heavy sections. And one thing that's really great about these companion guides, like the AT Thru Hiker one I was telling y'all about, is I didn't think about it at all the first time that I went, just because I was ignorant to it. But now that I've done several sections, you really want to kind of map out your days based on the elevation and like, you know, the downhill stuff too, because if you're doing like a really long day but it's lots of up and down, like that's going to kill you. And so it may be worth it through some of those sections to do some shorter days and just kind of make up ground on more of the more like flatter sections that don't have as many elevation changes, or it's a gradual increase or decrease. So one of those guides would be excellent for that, to really kind of understand what sections of the trail have those high points and low points, and what the terrain looks like. Because if you go in blind, like there's just no way of knowing, and you can really end up hurting yourself if you try to push too much in one day. All right, and so we got one last list here. This is the top 10 first-time camping mistakes. So number one is picking the wrong tent. Tents vary in quality, features, and style, and ease of setup. So for everyday, like weekend campers and people who are going out just with their family, or with their on their own, typically it's checking out what Walmart specials you got, or finding something at a Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop or outdoor store that's in your price range. But yeah, if you're going for like any kind of backpacking trip, or somewhere you're going to be breaking it down and setting it up a lot, definitely pay attention to like the style of tent poles and how quickly it sets up and the ease of use and everything. And then two, the weight. But if you're just doing like weekend stuff, the weights don't really matter. Car camping, I mean, you can pack as much weight as you want. But so definitely a good point there. Poor food preparation. That sounds like a familiar one. Not paying attention to plants. So yeah, when I was growing up, I pretty much spent ages 12 to 14 with poison ivy. Like every single time I'd go in the woods, I would get it. And it was just this perpetual cycle of, as soon as I got rid of it, I'd go back out and get it again, and it started again. So haven't gotten it in a really long time, which is great. Maybe I'll just become immune to it. But definitely pay attention to the plants and the stuff around you. Don't set your tent up in the middle of a poison ivy patch. Poison oak. All right. Counting on building a fire. So yeah, there are some places that you cannot have fires. There's some places that it's very difficult to have fires. And then, like Ben mentioned in his story, he told us sometimes there's just no firewood. And so you got to plan for that ahead. If you're going to a park somewhere, make sure you talk to the rangers and find out what the availability is, and if you got to bring your own wood and all that kind of stuff. And it's also very frowned upon to cut down live stuff anywhere you go. So keep that in mind, especially for those of us who are more aware of that and more conscious of that. The more that I've kind of gotten exposed to this leave no trace movement and kind of that type of mentality, I got to be honest, like, it's starting to bother me whenever I see people at like state parks and stuff etching their names into trees and all that. Like, it used to not bother me at all, but like now I'm just like, man, I really wish they wouldn't do that. And so anyway, maybe I'm becoming one of those people. I don't know, but it's just I just want people to be able to enjoy everything that we all get to enjoy, and not really ruin it for anybody else. So whacking down a bunch of trees and random plants and stuff for firewood is not going to make it very nice for the next person to come along. So off my soapbox. All right, not creating a list. So that's kind of a simple one, but it's definitely a good one, because there's so many different little things that go into a trip that it's a pretty big deal if you forget something. So I went one time by myself and thought I had everything in my bag, ended up not having my striker or matches, and so I pretty much had to use my little Jetboil pocket stove to light my fire with. So luckily I had that option. Wow. But that could have been a really bad night if I couldn't make a fire at all. So yeah, make a list. Arriving too late, we've talked about that one a little bit already. Bringing too much stuff, definitely talked about that one. Ignoring wildlife. So this one's interesting. I know we've heard some funny stories about, like, raccoons and squirrels and stuff like that, but it's definitely something you want to pay attention to. And the more camping that I'm planning on doing up in the mountains and maybe out west eventually, like, bigger animals come into play. So bears and those types of things, like, that's no joke. You got to have a plan for that and prepare to make sure that you're not attracting them, because it can get really dangerous really quick. Let's see here. Wearing the wrong clothes, for sure. And then not planning and not practicing. So that's kind of what I've been talking about with this whole experience, using the woods back here a lot, to just kind of as a training ground, to really learn some different tricks of the trade and get used to my gear and all that kind of stuff. I can't stress that one enough. This is kind of a funny show, like, to talk about these different things that have gone wrong. And so most of these stories are pretty funny. They're simple, like, nobody really got hurt or anything, but there's definitely plenty of camping fails that end up in people getting seriously hurt or killed. That can definitely change the course of your life. So I didn't really want to take it down that route, but I mean, it's important to note that there are some risks associated with this hobby, and you definitely got to take those into consideration. So if you're a new hiker or new camper and you're considering doing some really cool trips, definitely take the time to do your research, talk to folks who have done it a lot before, and try to educate yourself the best you can so you don't get out and get hurt or get lost or anything like that, because that happens all the time. I mean, we met a girl on the Appalachian Trail who bit off more than she could chew, and she was in kind of a panic trying to get off of the trail because she didn't have any cell phone service and stuff. So definitely plan ahead. So, well, what's the moral of the story, Brad?
Moral of the story is kind of, you already kind of summed it up, is pay attention, do your research, and don't carry too much weight. I think it's good, especially on these longer multi-day hikes. That's what it's going to really boil down to, is doing your research, making sure you got the right equipment and the right amount of stuff, and just practice, and try and cut down as much weight as possible.
Buy a scale. Yeah. I had one. I just didn't use it. But if you don't have one, get one. So, That's it for this episode. If you guys have any other stories that you want to share, send them on in. And I'm probably going to try to make this a regular thing. Maybe include it in some of the mini casts, and not take up a full episode. Unless I get a bunch of really good stuff, maybe we'll revisit it again. But thank you to everybody who sent in some stuff and had some stuff to share. Hope you enjoyed hearing it read on the show and shared. And I'm glad that I actually got some feedback from folks. It's always good to hear from people who are watching the show and following the show, and I really look forward to getting more of that included as well to build more of the Trail Connection community. So again, another quick reminder, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page, because we're starting to put out more regular content. We'll be putting out some smaller episodes in between the full episodes that are going to be more focused on gear reviews and trail previews and tools, like useful tools, things like that. So be sure to head over there and do that. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you hit that button too and get all the fresh content that comes out as it does. So thanks again, Brad, for joining me this week. And until next time, this is the Trail Connection. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Do me a favor and subscribe right down here. And if you want to check out some more Trail Connection videos, you can see them up over here or down over here. Thanks again, guys.